They didn't ask, they didn't call, they didn't even leave a note. They just tore down my fence like it didn't belong to anyone. Like the last 8 years of my life hadn't been poured into every post, every nail, every inch of that line I built with my own hands. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't about a fence. It was about control, and I don't let people take control of what's mine. I live out on what most people would call the edge of nowhere. About 3 acres tucked into a patch of woods where the trees grow thick and the road gets quiet enough at night you can hear your own thoughts, which, honestly, was the whole point. I didn't move out there to impress anyone. I moved because I needed space, real space, not just square footage, but distance from noise, from people, from all the invisible expectations that seem to come with living too close to others. Back in 2016, I built that fence. 6 feet tall, pressure-treated wood, wrapped around the entire property like a line in the sand. It took me 2 years to save up for the materials and another few months of weekends, sweat, and more than a few bruised knuckles to get it done. It wasn't perfect, but it was solid, and it meant something. It kept my dogs safe, gave me privacy, gave me a sense that this little corner of the world was mine. And for years, that was enough. My closest neighbor back then was an older guy named Harold, quiet, kept to himself, the kind of neighbor you wave to once a week, and that's about it. No drama, no problems, just the way I liked it. Then Harold passed, and about 6 months later, the house next door sold. That's when the Lennox family showed up. First thing I noticed wasn't even them. It was the moving trucks, 2 of them. Big ones, the kind that scream money. Then came the black SUV, spotless, city plates, and finally, Daniel Lennox himself, stepping out in sunglasses like he was arriving at some kind of event instead of a dirt driveway in the middle of nowhere. You can tell a lot about someone by how they look at land, and the way he looked at everything around him. It wasn't appreciation, it was evaluation, like he was already thinking about what needed to change. I met him that afternoon, just out of courtesy more than anything. Walked over, introduced myself, kept it simple. "Hey, I'm Ryan. I live next door." He shook my hand, firm grip, practiced smile. "Daniel, just moved in from San Francisco. Quite a change of pace out here." I nodded. "Yeah, that's kind of the point." He glanced past me, straight at the fence. Didn't say anything right away, just tilted his head a little, like he was studying it. Then he smiled again, but this one was different. "You ever think about opening this up a bit?" I followed his gaze. "Opening what up?" He gestured casually. "This, the fence, feels a little closed off, don't you think? I mean, we've got all this space. Could be something really beautiful if it flowed together." There it was. I remember just letting that hang for a second, not because I didn't understand him, but because I did, and I wanted to make sure I answered the right way the first time. "I built that fence for a reason," I said. "I like it the way it is." He chuckled softly, like I'd made a harmless joke. Sure, just a thought. No need for walls between neighbors, right?" I didn't laugh. No walls until someone needs one. That was the end of that conversation, at least on the surface. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things, little things at first. Daniel and his wife, Claire, hosting people almost every weekend. Music drifting over the trees, voices louder than you'd expect out here. Not enough to complain about, but enough to remind you they were there. Their kids would run up near the fence sometimes, kicking balls against it, laughing, shouting, again, not exactly wrong, just closer than I was used to. Then one evening, I caught Daniel standing right up against the fence line, hands on his hips, just staring at it. Didn't even realize I was watching him until I called out. "Something wrong with it." He turned, almost startled, then smiled again, always that same controlled smile. No, just thinking. It's a lot of wood, you know. Must have cost you a bit." "Took me a while," I said. He nodded slowly. "Ever think it might be overkill?" I shrugged. "Depends on what you're trying to keep out." That earned me a look. Not angry, not yet, just calculating. After that, things got quieter. Too quiet, actually. No more comments, no more casual suggestions about opening things up. For a while, it felt like maybe he'd just dropped it, realized I wasn't interested. And honestly, I let myself believe that. A couple weeks later, I took a short trip down to the coast. Nothing fancy, just needed a few days away. Cleared my head, turned my phone off more than I should have, forgot about everything back home. And that's probably why it hit me so hard when I pulled back into my driveway. At first, I couldn't quite process what I was seeing. The space looked wrong. Too open. I stepped out of the truck, squinting toward the property line, trying to make sense of it, and then it clicked, like a punch to the chest. The fence was gone. Not damaged, not partially knocked over, gone. 200 feet of solid wood fencing, just gone, like it had never existed. All that was left were the posts, some of them ripped out, others still stuck in the concrete, and pieces of the panels scattered across my yard like debris after a storm. And beyond that, I could see straight into their backyard. Right where my fence used to stand, there was a volleyball net set up, bright, new, perfectly centered, and Daniel's kids were running back and forth across what used to be my enclosed space, laughing like it had always belonged to them. For a second, I just stood there, keys still in my hand, engine ticking as it cooled, trying to slow everything down in my head, trying to give it some kind of reasonable explanation. There wasn't one. So I did the only thing that made sense. I walked straight across the open ground, past the broken panels, past the line that used to be mine, and onto his patio. Daniel was standing by a grill, flipping burgers like it was just another Saturday. He looked up, saw me coming, and smiled. "Hey, you're back. How was the trip?" I didn't answer that. I pointed behind me. "What happened to my fence?" He glanced over my shoulder, like he had to check what I was talking about, then turned back, completely relaxed. "Oh, that? Yeah, we took it down." Just like that. No hesitation, no apology, just a statement, like he was telling me he'd trimmed a hedge. I felt something shift in my chest, not just anger, something colder. "You took it down?" "Yeah," he said, setting the spatula aside. "We had someone come out, looked at the layout, figured it would be better if the yards connected. More usable space, you know? The kids love it already." I stared at him for a second, waiting for the part where he explained how this was a misunderstanding, where he said he thought it was shared property, or temporary, or anything that made sense. It didn't come. "That's my fence," I said. "On my property line." He waved a hand, dismissive. "Property lines are kind of flexible concepts, man. It's all just land at the end of the day." That was the moment I knew this wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. And somehow, he thought I'd just go along with it. I just stood there for a second, letting what he said settle in, not because I didn't understand it, but because I wanted to make sure I wasn't about to react in a way I couldn't take back. There's a difference between being angry and being out of control, and I've learned the hard way that once you cross that line, you lose more than you win. So I kept my voice steady. "You don't get to decide that," I said. "That fence wasn't decoration, it marked my property. You crossed it, tore it down, and now your kids are running around in my yard like it belongs to you." Daniel leaned back against the counter, arms folded, like we were just having a casual disagreement over something minor. "Look, I get it. Change is uncomfortable. But you'll see, this is better. More open, more community. That whole Boxton thing, it's outdated." I let out a breath through my nose, almost laughed, but there wasn't anything funny about it. "You didn't ask." He shrugged. "Didn't think I needed to." That right there, that was the real issue. It wasn't the fence, not entirely. It was the assumption, the quiet confidence that he could step into my space, make a decision for both of us, and I'd just adapt. "You need to put it back," I said, clear and simple. He shook his head immediately. "That's not happening." Silence stretched between us, broken only by the faint sizzle of grease on the grill. "You already got rid of it, didn't you?" I asked. "Most of it," he said, like he was talking about old furniture. "Had it hauled off. Cost me about $1,200, actually." He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, "If you want to split that, I'm not going to say no." For a second, I honestly thought I misheard him. "Split it," I repeated. "Yeah," he said. "I mean, we both benefit here." I looked at him, really looked this time, and it clicked. This wasn't just arrogance. It was a worldview. He genuinely believed he was improving things, that his version of better automatically applied to everyone around him. And in his mind, I was the one being difficult. I nodded slowly, more to myself than to him. "All right." He smiled again, like we'd reached some kind of understanding. "See? Knew you'd come around." I turned and walked away without another word. But I didn't go back inside. I grabbed my phone and started documenting everything, every broken panel, every exposed post, every inch where the fence used to stand. Took wide shots, close-ups, angles from both sides. If there was going to be a conversation about this later, and I knew there would be, I wasn't leaving anything up to memory. By the time I finished, The sun was starting to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across what used to be a clear boundary. And that's when it hit me, not just what he'd done, but what it meant if I let it slide. Because if I didn't push back, if I just adjusted, like he suggested, then that line, the one I spent years building, didn't exist anymore. Not just physically, but legally, mentally, it would become shared space by default. And I wasn't about to let that happen. That night, I called Sandra. Sandra Whitaker had been my attorney for years, mostly small stuff, contracts, property paperwork. She was the kind of person who didn't waste words, didn't sugarcoat anything, and definitely didn't lose. I emailed her the photos while we were on the phone. There was a pause as she looked through them. Then I heard her exhale sharply. They did what? Tore it down, I said. While I was out of town. Another pause, shorter this time, sharper. That's destruction of property. Trespassing. Possibly more, depending on how it's documented. Did you give them any kind of permission? No. Good, she said. Stay right where you are. Don't touch anything else. I'll handle this. The next morning, she was already drafting a demand letter. Formal, direct, no room for interpretation. It outlined exactly what had happened, cited property law, and required immediate restoration of the fence to its original condition at their expense. She had it sent certified, tracked, everything. Give them a chance to do the right thing, she told me. Most people fold when it gets real. I had a feeling Daniel Lennox wasn't most people. 3 days later, we got a response. Not from him. From a law firm. Out of Los Angeles. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Sandra forwarded me the letter, and I read it twice just to make sure I wasn't missing something. They didn't deny tearing down the fence. They reframed it. Claimed the structure was in a state of disrepair, that it posed a potential hazard, and that their client had acted in good faith to remove what they described as a deteriorating boundary feature. I actually laughed at that, out loud, sitting at my kitchen table. That fence was solid. Sandra didn't laugh. She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "All right, they want to play it that way." There was more. At the bottom of the letter, they made an offer. They proposed splitting the cost of installing a more aesthetically pleasing boundary solution, specifically a 3-foot decorative hedge. 3 feet. I leaned back in my chair, staring at that line. They want to replace a 6-foot privacy fence with a bush, I said. Sandra's voice was flat. That's what they're offering. No visibility barrier, no containment, just a line of plants. Correct. I rubbed my face, trying to process the sheer disconnect. That doesn't even serve the same purpose. It's not meant to, she said. It's meant to establish a compromise that benefits them. I could hear it in her tone now, that shift. The one that meant she'd moved past negotiation and into strategy. What do we do? I asked. We file, she said. Emergency relief. Property damage, trespass, and we request a court order to restore the boundary immediately. No hesitation. That was one of the reasons I trusted her. Within 48 hours, everything was in motion. Paperwork filed, evidence submitted, hearing scheduled. Daniel didn't come by again. Neither did Claire. The yard stayed open, their kids still playing out there like nothing had changed. But there was a tension now, something unspoken hanging in the air. They knew. And so did I. The hearing was set for the following week. I remember sitting in that courtroom, hands folded, trying to keep my mind steady while Sandra organized her notes beside me. Across the room, Daniel sat with his attorney, calm as ever, like this was just another meeting on his calendar. When the judge walked in, Judge Harper, older guy, sharp eyes, didn't look like someone who enjoyed wasting time. The room shifted. Sandra presented first. Clear, concise, walked him through the timeline, the photos, the property survey, everything. No theatrics, just facts. Then it was their turn. Daniel's attorney stood, adjusted his tie, and started laying out their version. Misunderstanding, safety concerns, good faith actions. I watched the judge's face the whole time. Didn't change much, but he was listening. When they finished, there was a brief pause. Then Judge Harper leaned forward slightly, looking down at the photos in front of him. This fence, he said, tapping one of the images, was it legally installed on the plaintiff's property line? Sandra didn't miss a beat. Yes, Your Honor. Fully permitted, surveyed, and documented. He nodded, then looked at the other side. And you removed it without explicit permission from the owner? Daniel's attorney hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Our client believed. That wasn't my question. The judge cut in, calm but firm. Was permission given? A longer pause. No, Your Honor. That was it. You could feel the shift in the room. The judge sat back, folded his hands. The court finds that the plaintiff's boundary fence was lawfully established and unlawfully removed by the defendants. You are hereby ordered to restore the fence to its original specifications within 14 days, at your expense. He paused, letting that land. Failure to comply will result in further legal and financial consequences. Gavel hit. Just like that. I glanced over at Daniel. For the first time since I'd met him, he wasn't smiling. Outside the courtroom, he caught up to me. This isn't over, he said quietly. I stopped, turned to face him. It could have been, I said. You just had to leave it alone. He shook his head, almost amused again, like he couldn't believe I was taking this as seriously as I was. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. No, I said. You already did that. We stood there for a second, neither of us moving. Then he leaned in just slightly. 14 days, he said. We'll see. And with that, he walked off. I remember watching him go, feeling that same cold certainty settle back in. Because something about the way he said it. It didn't sound like someone who planned on following the order. And deep down, I knew. If those 14 days came and went without that fence going back up, I wasn't just going to rebuild it. I was going to make sure it never came down again. 14 days sounds like a long time. Until you're the one waiting, watching the line where something used to stand, waking up every morning and seeing straight into a space that was never meant to be shared, noticing how normal it's starting to feel for them, and how wrong that is for you. Day 1 passed, nothing. Day 3, still nothing. By the end of the first week, I stopped expecting anything at all. Daniel didn't call, didn't knock, didn't even pretend to acknowledge what the court had ordered, and that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't forgetfulness, it wasn't delay, it was a choice. He was betting I'd get tired, that I'd settle, that eventually I'd accept the new normal, because pushing back would take more effort than giving in. And maybe that works on some people. Maybe in his world it works all the time. But he picked the wrong neighbor for that kind of gamble. On the morning of day 15, I didn't set an alarm, I didn't need to. I was already awake before the sun came up, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, looking out at that open stretch of land, and feeling something settle into place inside me. Not anger this time, not even frustration, just clarity. If someone shows you exactly who they are, you believe them, and you respond accordingly. Sandra pulled into the driveway just after dawn, right on time, like she always is, stepping out with a folder tucked under her arm, and that same calm, focused expression she'd had in court. Behind her came the rest, a flatbed truck loaded with steel panels, another hauling posts, a concrete mixer rumbling slow and heavy, and a crew of 6 guys who looked like they knew exactly what they were doing and had no interest in small talk. Daniel's house was quiet at first, curtains still drawn, no movement. For a moment, it almost felt like we were setting up a scene before anyone else realized what was about to happen. Sandra walked over to me, handed me a copy of the order. We're within our rights, she said simply. Everything we do today is covered. I nodded. Let's get it done. The surveyor was already there, marking the exact property line with bright stakes and string, double-checking measurements, making sure every inch was exactly where it needed to be. No assumptions, no gray area, just facts. The crew got to work immediately, pulling out the remaining posts, digging new holes deeper than before, setting the base for something that wasn't just a replacement, it was an upgrade in every sense of the word. The sound of machinery cut through the morning air, metal against dirt, engines idling, concrete pouring. And that's when the front door next door finally swung open. Daniel stepped out first, still in a t-shirt, barefoot, like he'd rushed out the second the noise hit him. Claire followed behind, pulling a robe tight around herself, both of them staring at what was happening like they couldn't quite believe it. He walked fast across the yard, stopping just short of the line, eyes scanning the trucks, the crew, the materials, and then landing on me. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. I didn't raise my voice, didn't step toward him, just held up the paper in my hand. "Day 15, I said. You didn't rebuild it." He glanced at the order, barely, then looked back at the structure already starting to take shape. "This isn't what we agreed on." I almost smiled at that. We didn't agree on anything. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration starting to crack through that controlled exterior he'd been holding onto this whole time. That was a 6-foot wooden fence. He pointed at the steel posts being set into concrete. What you're building, this is something else. I looked past him for a second, watching one of the panels being lifted into place, solid steel, no gaps, no visibility, then back at him. It meets the original height requirement, I said, and it's fully within code. Sandra stepped in then, calm as ever. The court order requires restoration of a boundary fence, she said. It does not restrict materials, as long as they comply with local regulations. Which this does. Daniel stared at her, then at me, then back at the crew, and for the first time, there was no clever response, no easy dismissal. Just frustration and something else underneath it. Realization. The hours passed fast after that. Hole by hole, post by post, panel by panel, the line came back to life, stronger, taller, and completely impenetrable. By mid-afternoon, it was done. 8 feet of solid steel running the full length of the property line, anchored deep into concrete, smooth, clean, and absolute. There was no seeing through it, no reaching over it, no pretending it wasn't there. It didn't just mark the boundary, it enforced it. Daniel stood on his side, staring at it in silence for a long time. Then he finally spoke, voice tight. You built a wall. I shook my head slightly. No, I said. You tore one down. Claire stepped forward then, softer but just as sharp. This is hostile. I looked at both of them, really looked this time. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, just clarity. What's hostile, I said, is deciding someone else's space doesn't matter. Neither of them had anything to say to that. The crew packed up, trucks rolled out, the noise faded, and just like that, the quiet came back. But it felt different now. Cleaner. Final. You'd think that would be the end of it, and for a while, it was. Days passed, then weeks. No more volleyball games, no more kids drifting into my yard, no more late-night noise bleeding through the trees. Just space again, the way it was supposed to be. But people like Daniel don't just let things go. About a month later, I got served. He was suing me. $75,000. Claiming the new fence reduced his property value, that it was excessive, obstructive, intentionally designed to damage his enjoyment of the land. A whole list of complaints dressed up in legal language. I remember sitting there with the papers in my hand, reading through it once, then again, and feeling something close to amusement. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. Sandra didn't seem surprised either. He's trying to regain leverage, she said. Turn the narrative around. Does he have a case? I asked. She shook her head. Not a strong one. When we got back into court, it felt different this time. Less tension, more inevitability. Daniel's attorneys started laying out their argument, talking about property values, visual impact, community standards, but it didn't take long before Judge Harper raised a hand. Counselor, he said, was the defendant's fence constructed within legal height and material regulations? A pause. Yes, Your Honor. And was it built after your client failed to comply with a court order to restore the boundary? Another pause, longer this time. Yes. The judge nodded once, then leaned back slightly. Then I'm not seeing the basis for this claim. That was it. No long debate, no drawn-out argument. Case dismissed. And more than that, Daniel was ordered to cover the legal costs. When we stepped out of the courthouse, I didn't look for him. Didn't feel the need to. Whatever this had been, it was over. Or at least, it was as over as something like this ever gets. Because here's the thing, it was never really about the fence. Not for him, and not for me. For him. It was about control, about shaping his environment to match his expectations, about assuming that what made sense in his world should apply everywhere else. And for me, it was about boundaries. The kind you can see, and the kind you can't. The line between being easygoing and being walked over. The difference between compromise and surrender. That fence, it just made those lines visible. So here's what I'll say, and I'm genuinely curious what you think. If you were in my position, would you have handled it differently? Was building that wall going too far, or was it exactly what needed to happen once the line had already been crossed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you'd probably expect. And if you've ever dealt with a neighbor who thought your space was negotiable, I'd want to hear that story too.